Day one of NHL free agency is in the books, and the Carolina Hurricanes have made some big moves. And we will be talking about all of those moves as well as where they fit in the lineup and the Hurricanes' day one departures in this episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I'm your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of this late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, or whenever you are listening to us. And as always, I am joined by my co-host, Andrew Schnittker. How are you doing on this late evening, Andrew?
I'm doing great. I'm still trying to process the day that was for the Carolina Hurricanes. It's been a busy day for me and for them.
Yes, it has been a busy day. The Hurricanes definitely appear to have won day one of free agency. That's for sure. And we're not just saying that, because, this is a Hurricane show. If they didn't, we say that they blew it, but they did not. And we're going to start off by going through all of the deals. I believe I have them down in chronological order of when they came out. And starting off with one, we won't spend a whole lot of time on this one because we talked about it yesterday when it got announced, and that is Jesper Fast re-signing for 2 years at 2.4 AAV, a little bit of a raise from what he was making already. He was at 2 million flat. Now he got himself a little bit of a raise, which was well earned. Love that he's back. And yeah, not a whole lot to say on that one because we did talk about it yesterday. But
yeah, I think like we talked about, I think that's a really good signing for the Hurricanes, and I think that that's a bargain rate, one that Jesper Fast could have gotten more on the open market.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was one, as well as two other guys that re-signed that we'll talk about here in a second, where we do feel that, they may have took a bit of a discount coming back, because they want to win. And, next up, we have Annti Raanta re-signing for 1 year at 1.8 million AAV. This was not necessarily a surprise signing because we had talked about how both Raanta and Andersen were wanting to come back. Andersen also re-signed later on in the day for 2 years. I don't know what his AAV is off the top of my head. I wasn't able to get that down in the notes. But yeah, both of those guys wanting to re-sign. We had already heard that. So the Hurricanes will be rolling with the 3 goalie tandem again this year, like they did last year with Andersen, Raanta, and then Kochetkov likely down in the AHL still. But no. It was just a 2-way for the 1 year, correct?
Yeah, he's on a one-way NHL deal, but they can send him to the AHL if needed, if they need him to go down and get some games, and he doesn't have to go through waivers. And they could bury most of the salary and I think less than half of the cap hit would be charged against them at the NHL level if he goes to the AHL. So they can still fairly easily send him down if they need to.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what they'll probably do this year. One thing I did like with the Andersen and Raanta signings is that they did do not kind of what I said they should do if they were to do that, of stagger those deals. Andersen on the 2, Raanta on the 1. I do like that. So they're not, in a year, 2 years, whatever, having two goalies be UFAs. I did like how they did do that and staggering that. And Raanta, being the number two, only signing him to a 1 year that pretty much guarantees that probably after that deal is up, then Kochetkov will be moving up full time. But I know you had some mixed emotions on Andersen and Raanta both re-signing.
So I think I've come around on this one because Frederik Andersen and Annti Raanta both took very team-friendly deals. Raanta gets 1 year by 1.5 million. Andersen years 3.4 million. They cost the Hurricanes 6.5 million combined last year. This year it'll be 4.9 million combined. Factor in Kochetkov, that's 6.9 million combined. And that's one of the things Waddell talked about today. All three of them on the roster, then they can do that, and it's not going to cost them too much. They have options. If they need to loan Kochetkov to the AHL somewhere, they can do that. Waddell said he's already found a couple options for doing so. I think, Ranta's the one who's making the least money out of the three. So say they end up, Kochetkov steps up and is ready to be the number two. They could roll with an Andersen and Kochetkov tandem and make, Raanta a frequent healthy scratch. Number three, make some spot starts. You look at the past couple of years, they've needed all three due to injuries. I mean, Andersen's had several injuries. Ranta's had some injuries. So I like them having that insurance of the three. I like the flexibility they gave themselves with the money. I'm on board with this because, the other thing of it is, with two other goalies, you can really make sure you keep Frederik Andersen healthy and fresh for the playoffs, which I think this past year he was fresh going into the playoffs, and you saw the dividends of that with his performance.
Yeah, I agree there. Now we have the big signing of the day, and that was Dmitry Orlov signing for 2 years at 7.75 AAV. This one kind of caught us all by surprise. We had both said that we weren't expecting the Hurricanes to make any big splashes in free agency. We expected that to come more in trades post free agency, like after the initial, rush wears off of free agency, kind of like they did last year. Well, actually, the Brent Burns and trade, and I think Max Pacioretty trade both also happened on free agency day as well. But that's how they made their splashes last year, and this year, they did it with free agency, signing Orlov. This are one of the best free agents on the market, the best defenseman on the market this year, and they locked him up for 2 years at 7.75. Love this signing. It's going to be super, super fun to watch. It's going to be a little bit weird to watch seeing him in a Hurricanes jersey because we weren't expecting that this year. And I'm really, really excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, I think this one was a bit of like you said, it was a surprise that they went out and signed, such a big money deal in free agency, that it was for a defenseman, not really what you'd think of as an area of need for the Hurricanes. But I feel like this almost harkens back to think back to the Dougie Hamilton trade. At that time, even a defenseman probably wasn't the Hurricanes' need. But the mentality is just, you have an opportunity to get good players and make your team better. That's what you do. And certainly Dmitry Orlov is a great player. He makes the Hurricanes better. And I think they had an opportunity here with the flat cap. They gave him probably more money. I mean, it's an overpayment on the AAV, but the reasoning is that it keeps the term down. It's only a 2-year deal. He's 32. 2 years isn't much of a risk. Like I said, he's a really, really good player, good two-way defenseman, really good puck mover. I think, going to be a really good fit in the Hurricane system. So, I really like the mindset here. The Hurricanes, figured out an opportunity to add a really good player to their team, and they pounced on it. And I think that's, the mentality that every team should have. And as of right now, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, the blue line is stacked. I think there's going to be some more moves to come there, but certainly Dmitry Orlov is a great pickup who makes the Hurricanes better. And boy, is it a new era when we are talking about the Carolina Hurricanes going out and getting one of the top players on the free agent market in day one. Something we really have not seen. And, we've always heard on these days, we like our group, or, free agency is such a dangerous day. They pounced on an opportunity, and I think they're really going to reap the benefits of that.
Yes, they are. And yeah, it's so weird compared to years past. Then we do have one more free agent signing, and we will talk about that free agent signing right after this quick break, folks. All right, folks. The MLB season is underway. And if you're willing to place a bet on your favorite team, do so with FanDuel. Take your first swing on betting MLB on FanDuel. Get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's 200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over under to who you think is going to score the first home run. All that on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on the MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit fanduel.com/locked on to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Now we do have one more free agent signing to talk about, and that was, I am going to butcher his last name because I have never been able to pronounce it, but I'm going to have to learn to now. That was Michael Bunting signing for 3 years at 4.5 AAV. And yeah, he's coming off a back-to-back, I believe, 21 or 23 goal seasons. And, real pest, adds some physicality, and, back-to-back 20-plus goal seasons. That's great as well. So this is another signing that I think, kind of took some folks by surprise.
I think this is one that was a little more in line with what the Hurricanes like to do. And I think this is a kind of player, trying to get a guy who, obviously adds an offensive scoring touch. Like you said, back-to-back 20-plus goal seasons. But who brings that, feistiness? Why Dom Waddell called him feisty in his press conference today. Brings that physicality, brings that edge. It's a guy who's, not people don't like playing against. Is going to go out there, make, stir things up, make the opponent mad. I think that's the kind of player that the Hurricanes, Rod Brind'amour and Dom Waddell have wanted. And, you hear a lot of people talk. One of the things the Hurricanes might have been missing playoff time, in addition to goal scoring, was maybe some toughness that he can add. You look last year, they tried to get Mason Marchment. They didn't. So I think this is a nice add. In Toronto, he was playing with Austin Matthews. Obviously that probably helps his stats a little bit, but that shows you, that he can hang with top players, go out there, retrieve pucks, crash the net, create space for them. If he can fill that same role with, playing alongside, say, Sebastian Aho, I think he's a really, really valuable addition for the Hurricanes. I like what he brings to this team a lot.
Yeah, I know. I'm really enjoying, seeing these signings today. And, we're going to move on to, where do these guys fit in the lineup? Because that is going to be very, very interesting. You figure Fast, he'll probably stay where he's at. Obviously, we know Andersen and Raanta, they're going to be the 1-2 in net. So we're really looking at the new guys here. Orlov, Bunting, those are the guys we're looking at here. And, because we have talked about just how loaded the Hurricanes blue line is. You already had I totally blanked. Brent Burns and Jacob Slavin on your top pair. You have Brady Shea and Brett Pesce on your second. And then you had that opening next to Jalen Chatfield on your third pairing. But you bring in Dmitry Orlov on a deal like that, you're not putting him on your third pairing. So it's going to be really interesting to see where he ends up slotting in. Does Shea or Pesci move down to play alongside Jalen Chatfield there on that third pairing, and then Orlov slots in on the second pairing with whoever ends up remaining there. That's what I think is probably the most likely. There's still the Tony DeAngelo trade that is still gonna happen probably. We're just kind of having to wait for that. So he'll likely be the extra guy there for the Hurricanes defenseman, and he kind of slots in whenever they need him to, I guess. But yeah, it's going to be interesting where Orlov slots in on the defensive pairing. I think the second pair is probably the safe bet as of right now.
Yeah, I could see him playing on that second pairing next to Brett Pesci as of now. I mean, here's the bottom line for me though. Like you said, you bring in Orlov 2 years. You're not paying him that much to be a third pairing defenseman. I don't think you go to all this trouble of trading for Tony DeAngelo to make him your number 7 defenseman. I think it is extremely likely that one of Brett Pesci or Brady Shea will not be on the Hurricanes opening night roster. I think one of them will be traded, depending on who they think they can get an extension done with, what they work out. Because here's the thing now, that this gives the Hurricanes some options. You move on from Brady Shea. Okay, great. Orlov is a left defenseman. You plug him in next to Pesci. No disrespect to Brady Shea, but that pairing gets even better because Dmitry Orlov is a better defenseman than Brady Shea. You move out Brett Pesci. Orlov is not Jacob Slavin, but I think I would be more comfortable with him there to cover for Tony DeAngelo than I would Jalen Chatfield playing his offside, and then maybe Brady Shea and Jaden Chatfield play together. Also, apparently, the Hurricanes are still according to Pierre LeBrun a couple hours ago, the Hurricanes are still pushing for Erik Karlsson. So maybe Shea and Pesci are both gone, and the Hurricanes are going to just build this ridiculous star-studded revamped blue line. I don't know how likely I find that one, but I mean, my point being, yes, as of right now, you're looking at a really interesting picture with those guys, for opening night. If this is the group that you have, but I think there are going to be more moves to come on the blue line. I think that is very much still a fluid situation.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it would suck, as a fan to see Brett Pesci go, to see Brady Shea go. Yeah, it would suck to see them there. But like you said, it's definitely an upgrade throwing Orlov there on that second pairing. Whether it's Shea there or Pesci there, I think it's an upgrade regardless of how you spin it there. And I'm really excited to see what they end up going with. And like you said, a few hours ago, the Hurricanes are still in on Erik Karlsson too. So that would be freaking awesome. I do feel if they make that trade, Shea and Pesci are both gone. Because I definitely think that if they're gonna make that trade for the guy that just won the Norris, they're gonna have to give up a hefty sum there for Erik Karlsson, which that would still be freaking cool if they were able to get him. That's another one. If you saw him in a Hurricane jersey, that'd just be so weird.
Oh man, I mean, we've already seen with Brent Burns. I mean, Max Pacioretty for 5 games. We're gonna see Dmitry Orlov's a good player. He's a little bit less of that,
the star
NH like Erik Karlsson. I mean, that's like almost like the defenseman equivalent. You look at productive players of the past decade of seeing like Sidney Crosby or Alex Ovechkin in an NHL in a Hurricanes uniform. Like Erik Karlsson is one of the best NHL defensemen of all time.
I know it would be so cool if they were able to pull off that trade. And obviously, if they do, we will of course talk about it here on the show. But that's just kind of speculation. We can do a segment later on in the week about what they would have to give up for Erik Karlsson if they don't make that trade, or he isn't traded by then. But the last guy, Michael Bunting, where do you think he slots in on the Hurricanes roster? This is one I'm not really sure about.
So this is one that I like because I think the Hurricanes have a lot of options here with the game that he plays. I think he's a fit. on the top line with Sebastian Aho, I think he could be a fit on a second line with, Jesperi Kotkaniemi and one of like Andrei Svechnikov or Martin Necas or Seth Jarvis. I think the Martinook Stahl Fast line will be together again, but if the Hurricanes configure some things differently, I think the game he plays, he'd be a great fit next to Jordan Stahl and Jesper Fast. The other thing here is I'm not sure the Hurricanes are done up front either, because say they move Shea or Pesce, either a forward comes back in that deal, you move one of them for futures, and you use the cap space to either go trade for another forward, or there's guys still on the market like we talked about Tyler Bertuzzi. He hasn't signed. Vladimir Tarasenko hasn't signed. So like Bunting's a good player, but he's not that, elite goal scorer that we've talked about. So I could still see the Hurricanes making another big add up front if it's, coupled with a departure on defense. But again, I think just going back to Michael Bunting, the nice thing there is, you look at his game, nose for the net, puck retrieval, hard on the forecheck, which ideal fit for the Hurricane system, really makes him, I think, a fit on any line for the Hurricanes. It almost gives Rod Brind'amour, I think, a little bit of a chess piece that he can move around. He's the kind of guy that, if you need a spark, maybe you put him with some different guys. So, no, I think this is one that gives Rod Brind'amour a lot of options. And again, just hearing about his game and the edge that he brings, I think this is a guy that Rod Brind'amour is going to love.
Yeah, it's definitely feels like one of those guys. Kind of like how they'll do with Jordan Martinook sometimes of move him around. How they would do with Brock McGinn, some of move him around.
Except Bunting can actually score, so that's nice.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Well, remember McGinn did go on that one like ridiculous stretch that one
That's
time.
true. That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, kind of like one of those guys. Yeah, they just kind of move around. I definitely see that being the thing there. And like you said, I don't think they're done. If they make the trade for Carlson, they sign Bertuzzi, they sign Tarasenko, they do stuff like this, that would be, just more things to figure out of where they would go. I think you could see him. I think you're right on the Stahl Fast line. I think Martinook moves back down to the fourth, at least to start out the season. Maybe if things change, as the season rolls on. We've seen that happen countless times with every team. You start one way, and then the season progresses, and then you realize, hey, if we move this guy here and that guy there, that works better. I think Martinook back down to the fourth line and Bunting on that third line. I think that is where they'll start the season, but it also wouldn't surprise me, if they just don't break up that Martinook Stahl Fast line because it was so good last year. But this is something that, only time is going to tell. We still, got to get, there's still those guys on the market. There's still trades to be made. We still got to get to training camp and, in the preseason and all this stuff. So many things can change between now and opening night. You never know. Obviously, knock on wood, the whole Max Pacioretty thing last season, who we'll talk about him in a second and where he went. We kind of had him slotted in somewhere, and then he doesn't start the season. He's out till trade deadline, essentially. So, you don't really want to, write this stuff down in ink right now because so much can change between now and October 11th when they play the Senators. So, it's going to be really interesting to see how things shake out for sure. Obviously, looking forward to more moves that the Hurricanes end up making, but we do want to talk about the Hurricanes' day one departures as well, guys that have since left the organization, found new homes, and we'll also talk about guys that still have yet to sign that were with the Hurricanes, and we will get to that right after this quick break, folks. All right, folks, we are back, and it is time to talk about the guys that have since found new homes that were a member of the Hurricanes organization last year. Starting off, someone that we literally just spoke about, Max Pacioretty. He has signed with the division rival Washington Capitals. Obviously, wishing him the best there. Did not, have the season that he probably would have wanted because he played, what'd you say, 5 games this year?
Yeah, 3 goals, 5 games. We get that little tease of what this could be, and then it was just ripped away.
Yeah, I know it sucked for sure, but I think we all kind of figured he would probably leave.
Yeah.
And unless they were able to do something of take a team friendly deal. I believe he only signed for like 2 something million.
I
And
think it was
I'll
2 on
actually
the
have it
dot.
right here. 2 million plus an additional 2 million in performance based incentives. So
Okay.
obviously
And those, I think
wishing
those
him the
go
best
against your
there.
cap the next year if they hit them or something like that, so they don't have to pay them the first year.
Yeah, and wishing him the best there, but that's one that's not really a surprise. Then you had goalie in the system, Zach Sawchenko, signing with Vancouver a 1-year, 2-way deal. That was one we both said that we figured he would be one of the guys that would you know be on the move for the Hurricanes. And one guy that we expected the Hurricanes to re-sign that was in their AHL system was Max Lajoie. He is now a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs along with William Lagson. Both of those guys signed with the Leafs, both 1-year, 2-way deals. Lajoie was a guy that the Hurricanes kind of called upon a few times over the past few years when they had some defensemen go down, and him being a guy to kind of step up into the fray, to help out, and he did good for the Hurricanes. We both expected that out of all of the AHL guys, he would be the one that the Hurricanes kept, and he walked.
Yeah, the one thing about that I would say, he didn't play for them at all this past season. He didn't come up. They did qualify Dylan Coughlin, so that's probably your number 7 defenseman. The thing about signing guys like Lajoie, you mentioned Sawchenko, another one, Mackenzie McEachern, signed with the St. Louis Blues organization. Those are filling out your AHL roster type moves. And guess what the Hurricanes aren't, we keep talking about this. They're not going to have to fill out this year is an AHL roster. So that's why you see those guys depart. And, it's why, in years past, like in the days after July 1, you'd see the Hurricanes make a flurry of those types of signings, guys on 2-way deals, AHL veteran types. You're not probably going to see that this year because the only thing they're going to be doing with the AHL is, like we heard Matt talk about last week, loaning some of their AHL age prospects to other teams so they get a chance to play, but they're not responsible for building and filling out an AHL roster this year. So you're not going to see a lot of, the Mackenzie McEachern, Max Lajoie types. The downside of that being, you look at in years past, those guys have, been called upon for the Hurricanes in the playoffs, but I'm sure they'll figure out some way to fill out the Black Aces roles when the time comes this year.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those, I think, like you said, they don't have to fill out that AHL roster this year, so they're not it's not going to be as big of a concern this year. I do see them, in the coming days making some of those moves, simply, because if something were to happen, like you said, with playoffs, just having those guys, but they're not going to have as many as they had in the past. And then I guess arguably the biggest departure was Shane Gostisbehere signing in Detroit at a really surprising deal. We were talking about this before we started recording. 1 year, 4.125 million AAV. This was really surprising to both of us because we were expecting him to go after some term with this deal, and he only signed a 1 year. That was surprising for sure.
I think the theme you're seeing across the league is a lot of guys signing these short-term deals and betting on themselves right now while the cap is still flat because it's expected to start going back up by a pretty significant margin, I think, next offseason, which will be good news for the Hurricanes with those extensions. But, I mean, you see it with him. I agree. I thought he was a guy who would get more term, more money. But I think again, he's betting on himself, hoping to go have a good year with Detroit and try to cash in next year when there's more cap space for teams to play with. Because honestly, that's a deal I would have thought the Hurricanes, I'd have done if I was the Hurricanes, and I'd be sitting here like, man, why didn't they do that? If not for the fact that they just went out and signed the best defenseman on the market. But even you look at that, like I think with Orlov, him signing a 2-year deal, he's making that bet on himself, to hit free agency again in 2 years with a higher cap. You look at a guy like Matt Duchene signing in Dallas, 1 year, $3 million. I know he's got the buyout money coming from Nashville, but I thought he'd get more. So I think, Shane Gostisbehere is just another example of kind of the unfortunate impact that the flat cap has had on some of these free agents. And I think things will be better for the players and for the league as a whole once the cap starts rising at its normal rate again.
Yeah, I agree there. I think, like you said, Duchene, Gostisbehere, Orlov, these are guys that are just betting on themselves right now. And it's going to be it's going to be interesting once the cap does start going back up. Like you said, the Hurricanes have these extensions coming up here in the next couple years with Sebastian Aho, Jacob Slavin, if Brett Pesci's still around, if Brady Shea is still around. You got these guys coming up, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with those. And again, there's probably going to be some more deals coming out tonight as we're in bed when we wake up in the morning and just as the next few days go on, because like you said, there's still some big names out there that haven't been signed yet, as well as trades that could still happen. Again, we do know that Tony DeAngelo one is probably going to happen. It's just a matter of waiting it out, I guess. The appeal the Hurricanes and Flyers had with the NHL at the draft. NHL still said no, and that's one that will happen in a few days. It'll be interesting to see what the Hurricanes give up, because I don't remember what it was. I know it wasn't a lot though, and then of course
just a prospect. I think I think even an unsigned prospect, but I do think that's still going to happen because Dom Waddell was asked directly about it today, and he straight up said, we have a trade agreement in principle with Philly. We just have to wait for a certain date. So I don't really think he would say that in those clear and succinct of terms if, he wasn't planning on still going through with it.
Yep. And that's why I brought it up, because of him saying that. And should they make a big splash in trade? Because like we've talked about already this episode with Erik Karlsson, if they were able to pull that off and sign away San Jose's other big defenseman, it's going to be San Jose East Coast over here with the Hurricanes blue lines if they do that. And it's silly season, man. It's silly season. The Hurricanes are going out and taking full advantage of it, and I'm totally here for it.
Yeah, that's it. I keep saying it's a fun time to be a Hurricanes fan. It was certainly a fun time to be a Hurricanes fan today.
Yes, it was. And we will obviously continue to talk about whatever the Hurricanes do over the weekend. On Monday morning, we will talk about all of that. Unless they do an Erik Karlsson trade, then we'll definitely have to hop on this weekend and keep going into that. But make sure you're following the Hurricanes along on Twitter at LO_Hurricanes. Follow myself on Twitter at Jared Ellis _96 and Andrew on Twitter at ASchnitt53 with the Jeff Skinner shout out there. He's a guy that
Probably not a trade we're gonna see.
Yep, not a trade we're gonna see back to Carolina. Unlike Elias Lindholm, maybe we see that one. Maybe we don't. But Jeff Skinner will not be one that returns to the Carolina Hurricanes. But we will talk to you guys in the next episode. Enjoy free agency, folks, and we will talk to you guys in the next episode.